I fell in love with the girl who sat alone in the same coffee shop every Friday. For 6 months, I never spoke to her. Then one simple question changed both of our lives forever. I had no idea that 1 year later, I would risk my own life to save hers from a burning building. And what she whispered to me in the hospital made every firefighter in the room cry. My name is Noah Walker. This is the greatest love story of my life. My name is Noah Walker. I was 28 years old and worked as a firefighter in Chicago. Most people think firefighters only fight fires. The truth is we also carry memories that never leave us. Every Friday after my shift, I stopped at the same small coffee shop before going home. At exactly 5:30, she was always there. A young woman sitting alone by the window with a cup of coffee and the same old book. She never looked at anyone. She never smiled. For 6 months, I watched her from a distance. Every Friday, I wanted to say hello. Every Friday, fear stopped me. Then one rainy evening, every table in the coffee shop was full except the empty chair across from her. I took a deep breath, walked over and asked, "Is this seat taken?" She looked up for the first time. Her beautiful blue eyes met mine. A small smile appeared on her face. She quietly said, "I was wondering how much longer you were going to keep watching me before saying hello." I stood there completely speechless. Then she laughed. And in that single moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. The next few minutes felt effortless. Her name was Emily Carter. She loved old books, quiet places, and rainy afternoons. I told her about my job as a firefighter. She smiled and said, "That explains why you always looked so tired." We laughed together like we had known each other for years. Before leaving, she looked at me and asked, "Will you be here next Friday?" I smiled and said, "Only if you are." From that day, every Friday became our favorite day of the week. We shared stories, dreams, and the little moments that made life beautiful. Weeks turned into months. Then one Friday, she did not come. I waited for hours. The next Friday, her chair was still empty. The coffee shop suddenly felt colder than ever. I had no way to contact her. No phone number. No address. Nothing. For the first time in months, I realized how deeply I had fallen in love with a girl I barely knew. And I had no idea that the reason she disappeared would change both of our lives forever. The third Friday, I went back anyway. I knew her chair would probably be empty. But I could not stop hoping. As I was about to leave, the old waitress walked over to me. She placed a folded note on the table. She said, "Emily asked me to give this to you if you ever came back." My hands started shaking as I opened it. The note said, "Noah, I did not disappear because I stopped caring about you. I disappeared because I was afraid you would see the truth. I have been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors say I need surgery soon. I did not want you to fall in love with someone who might not have much time left." At the bottom of the note was the name of the hospital. Without thinking, I ran out of the coffee shop. I drove across the city as fast as I could. When I finally reached her hospital room, the bed was empty. A nurse looked at me and quietly said, "You are Noah. She has been waiting for you, but you are already too late." Then she handed me another envelope, and my heart nearly stopped. My hands were shaking as I opened the second envelope. Inside was a short letter. "Noah, if you are reading this, it means you came looking for me. I knew you would. Please do not be angry. I only wanted you to remember me smiling in that little coffee shop, not lying in a hospital bed." Tears filled my eyes. I looked at the nurse and asked, "Where is she?" The nurse smiled gently. She said, "You are not too late. Emily is in surgery right now. She asked us to give you the letter before you saw her." I ran toward the operating room. The red surgery light was still on. For hours I sat outside praying. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then the surgeon finally walked out. He removed his mask and looked directly at me. My heart stopped. The first words he said changed my life forever. She made it. But there is something you need to know. I could barely breathe. The doctor looked at me and said, "The surgery was successful. But Emily has been hiding something from you." He handed me a small box that she had asked him to give me after the operation. Inside was a silver key, a photograph, and another letter. The photograph showed a little boy about 6 years old. On the back, Emily had written, "His name is Liam. He is my son. I never told you because I was afraid you would walk away." Tears rolled down my face, not because she had a son, but because she thought I would stop loving her. A few minutes later, the nurse told me Emily was awake. I walked into her room. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I am sorry for hiding the truth." I took her hand and smiled. Then I looked at the little boy standing quietly in the corner. I knelt down in front of him and said, "Hi, Liam. My name is Noah. Can I be your friend?" The little boy smiled, ran into my arms, and hugged me as tightly as he could. Emily covered her face and began to cry. For the first time in months. They were tears of hope. 6 months later, Emily was healthy again. Every Friday, we returned to the same little coffee shop. Only this time there were 3 of us. Emily, Liam, and me. One evening, Liam looked at me and asked, "Noah, are you going to stay with us forever?" I smiled and said, "If your mom says yes." Emily laughed through her tears. A few weeks later, I took them to the place where we first met. The same table by the window was empty. I got down on one knee, holding the ring with shaking hands. I looked into Emily's eyes and said, "The day I asked if this seat was taken, I had no idea you would take my heart forever. Will you marry me?" Emily could not speak. She simply nodded and hugged me. The entire coffee shop burst into applause. A year later, we were married. Liam walked down the aisle carrying our rings. As he reached me, he smiled and quietly said, "Thank you for choosing us." At that moment, I realized, sometimes the greatest love story is not about finding the perfect person. It is about choosing each other every single day. And every Friday, we still sit at the same table, where one simple question changed our lives forever. 3 years passed. Life felt perfect. Emily was healthy. Liam was growing up. And every Friday, we still visited the same coffee shop. One afternoon, Liam came home from school unusually quiet. He looked at me and asked, "Dad, why do some kids say you are not my real father?" My heart broke. I knelt beside him and said, "A real father is not the man who gives you life. A real father is the one who never leaves your side." Liam threw his arms around me and whispered, "Then I already have the best dad in the world." Emily stood in the doorway listening. She wiped away her tears. In that moment, I realized something. Love is not measured by blood. It is measured by the promises you keep. And I promised them one thing. No matter what happened, I would never let them face life alone. 10 years passed. Liam was no longer a little boy. He had grown into a kind and confident young man. One evening he asked Emily and me to meet him at the same coffee shop where our story had begun. When we arrived, the table by the window was waiting for us. Liam stood up holding a small box in his hands. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Dad, everything good in my life started because you chose us. You taught me that love is not about blood. It is about showing up every single day." Then he handed me the box. Inside was an old silver key, the same key Emily had left for me in the hospital years ago. Liam smiled and said, "I kept it because it reminds me that one brave decision can change an entire lifetime." Emily reached for my hand. We looked at each other and smiled. Outside, the rain began to fall just like the day we first met. I looked at the empty chair across the table and quietly whispered, "No, this seat was never empty. It was always waiting for us." And that was the moment I knew. The greatest love stories are not the ones that begin perfectly. They are the ones that survive every storm together. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Subscribe for more emotional stories.